Hey everyone, I'm Almar of almarsguides.com, and in this video here, I'm going to be talking about the Seder or Seidr worker class in Titan Quest. I googled how to pronounce it before I made the video, and I found two different pronunciations. Apparently, like the 4-in-1, where the old Norse pronunciation is Seidr, and the new one, is, like typical, I guess, basic English is Seidr, kind of like the Seidr animals you find in Act 1. Anyway, this combination, this mastery combination, is a combo between Dream and Rune Mastery, and if I had to rank it, I would put it above average or like borderline good. It's a very, very basic build though, so keep that in mind. There are a few different ways to play it, and a few like skills you can kind of mix and match into the rotation, if you will. I'll talk about that throughout the video. And so let's hop in, take a look at the skills I chose first, my build, and then the gear, stats, and then we'll show you it in action. So, Dream Mastery. This mastery is mostly just going to be, you're mostly just going into here for support skills. You will want to get a Trance. I use Trance of Convalescence because I want the extra survivability. If you want the extra damage, you can get Trance of Wrath. If you want like a mix of extra damage and a mix of extra survivability, Trance of Empathy is the one you should go with. So I mean, really pick whatever you're lacking in the most or whatever you want the most. I don't think any of these trances will make or break the build. So you want to get all three of these passives. These passives are extremely good: Lucid Dream, Premonition, and Temporal Flux. Get all of them, max them all out. Summon Nightmare, I recommend you put a few points into Summon Nightmare and Hypnotic Gaze when you're low level. And then also just 1 point into Mastermind. At all times, don't dump any more points into it, because we only have one pet, and that's mostly for multiple pet classes. Once you get higher level and you start running out of useful skill points to put in other abilities, I'd recommend you dump more into Summon Nightmare and Hypnotic Gaze. But only until, not until you get to a higher level will you start dumping extra points into those. Aside from those abilities, there is nothing extra that is worthwhile to get in Dream, with one exception: Phantom Strike. So sometimes Seder worker builds, they use a combination of Thunder Strike and Phantom Strike. These two abilities in being used together is very, very, very good burst damage. However, usually when they use Phantom Strike and Thunder Strike, they're going to be using a melee weapon instead of a throwing weapon. I am personally using a throwing weapon with this build. Therefore, I went a slightly different route. I didn't go the Phantom Strike route. So, this is Rune Mastery. This is going to be our main mastery, where almost all of our points are being spent, and there are a lot of really, really good abilities in here. So I went with Rune Weapon, and this is my left click ability because I'm not doing Phantom Strike, Thunder Strike. If you are doing Thunder Strike, Phantom Strike, you probably avoid Rune Weapon altogether, because Thunder Strike will be your left click and Phantom Strike will be your right click, or vice versa. You can, swap them around if you want. It doesn't really matter. But they would be your two main abilities if you went that route for this build. But instead, I use Rune Weapon. I'd recommend you max Rune Weapon as well as all of the passives that come with it. They're all great. Apparently, Magical Charge is the best passive. This is just what I've read. I've not personally tested it myself, but I have read from multiple sources that Magical Charge is a good passive. I have not read why, though. I've only read that it is a good passive from multiple sources. So if anybody can clear that up for me, I would appreciate it greatly, honestly. Sacred Rage. 1 point into that as well as the passive. That's really all you need. This build, you will get spiked down low in health sometimes, so Sacred Rage does help. Activates when you drop below 40% health. So Reckless Offense right here. This is another way to play this build if you would like to. Reckless Offense allows you to dual wield, and you can dual wield throwing weapons. So if you wanted to use, instead of a throwing weapon and a shield, if you wanted to use 2 throwing weapons, you could do that with Reckless Offense. So Energy Armor. This ability is, how do I describe it? Crappy, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. It has a very, very high energy cost, and it doesn't absorb a good amount of, it has a very high energy cost, and it constantly goes down. Like, you have to recast it every single fight, which is a bit, high energy costs, for lack of better words. And that's the main thing that is bad about it. Otherwise, it's really good. I mean, if you don't mind casting it every fight, and you don't mind chugging those energy potions, more power to you. It'll definitely give you some extra protection, that's for sure. So, Rune Word Absorb. Don't get this unless you're using a shield. Since I am using a shield on my character, I got Rune Word Absorb. If you're doing two throwing weapons, you get Reckless Offense instead. Rune Word Explode as well as Rune Word Burn. You want to max these out. They just increase your DPS when you're Rune Mastery. Thunderstrike, like I said before, this is one of your main 2 attacks, so you'll definitely want to max it out, as well as the Unleash passive that comes with it. Seal of Fate. This is one of those optional abilities that you can get with this build if you want. I really don't like the Seal of Fate ability. I know many people swear by it though, so it's up to you if you would like to go that route. It's somewhat easy. I usually drop Seal of Fate on myself and then tank the enemies on top of it, and it blows up and hits the enemies. So Rune Word Feather, this is another really, really good passive. Reduces the strength requirement on all of your weapons, which would be great for those of you that are going a melee Seidr worker. It would basically, well, you'd be putting a lot of points into strength anyway for physical damage buff, but this helps a lot for the throwing weapons build I have now, because if I have a throwing weapon that requires strength, I don't have to dump a lot of points into strength to use it. So Runic Mines. This is probably my favorite ability in all of the rune tree, and the reason for this is multiple reasons I have for this. Sorry, I have a dry throat. Should have gotten more water before I started filming. This ability is good for pulling enemies. You can pull enemies in adjacent rooms by dropping Runic Mines, because it puts them like all across the screen. Freezing Mines, the first passive you can get after Runic Mines. This has a chance of not only freezing the enemy in place, but also slowing their movement speed, which is great. I use Runic Mines not only at the start of every single fight, but also if I'm fighting a very hard enemy / group of enemies. I will kite them around the area, dropping Runic Mines as I run around, because as enemies step on the Runic Mines, they'll not only take damage, but they'll also be slowed, which means there'll be more of an opportunity for me to do damage to them, which is great. Lovely, of course. It's like the best kiting ability you can get. So Rune Storm, unless you have a lot of recharge gear, I don't honestly recommend you get this ability, although I will say this ability does deal a decent amount of damage, and it is a nice ability. It just has a very, very long cooldown, and it doesn't last very long. I recommend you skip both Menhir Wall and Guardian Stones, although I guess for this build, if you wanted to use them, if you liked those abilities, you could use them. I personally do not like either of those abilities. They're just not for me. Rune of Life, this is one of the main buffs you'll be using in the Rune Mastery tree, and it is a fantastic buff. You can also use this on not only yourself, but on your pet. So I definitely recommend you get this and use it on both you and your pet constantly. So here, I'll cast it on my Summon Nightmare Eyeball. So moving on to gear and stats. I use on this character the Freyella. However, there are plenty of other throwing weapons that you can use on this character, like Chakram of the Moon is also a very good throwing weapon that works on this character. But really, also there's a... sorry, hiccups now. Just not catching a break. There's also a monster uni called Diverger Runestones that drop from enemies in Act 5, specifically towards the end of the act in the same area where the legendary craftsmanship quest takes place. Those enemies, like I said, the monster infrequent Diverger Runestones that they drop is a very good weapon for this build, and also a very good weapon for other Rune Mastery builds, so I would recommend that. But this weapon, the main reason that I chose it and like it is because it has a 33% chance of increasing your elemental damages by 263%, which is insane. If you're not using Rune Weapon, though, the left-click ability I have, then this weapon would be a lot less useful, because then your main damage would not be elemental damages. So what I use for rings are Chiron's Loop and Eurydice's Wedding Band. The main reason that I chose Chiron's Loop is because I wanted the pierce and poison resist that comes with it. I also like the small amount of survivability that the ring gives you as well. Health regen, defensive ability, and a flat % chance to dodge attacks. I love all of them. And Eurydice's Wedding Band, I use it for this. I also got this for survivability and nothing else as well. I needed the extra 10% health, and honestly, mostly all I needed from this ring was the 10% health, because I had just below like 5,000 health, and it's too low for me. See, if I take the ring off, I have 4,700 health. That's too low for me. I was a little bit too squishy to be comfortable. And it also gives offensive ability, which is nice. Well, not as nice for this build, but because we're not using many offensive, physical attacks. I don't think it works with spells, offensive ability. Actually, I'm positive it doesn't work with spells, although I don't know what Thunderstrike is counted as. It honestly might work with Thunderstrike because I don't think it's a spell. Anyway, off topic. Aside from the health, the other things that are useful, like defensive ability, it all basically increases your survivability. This shield I am using specifically for this build. I like the vitality damage resistance on it, which is part of the reason I grabbed it, but I also wanted to try the 25% chance of 52 elemental retaliation, as well as the Runestorm skill that is activated on the shield. Runestorm doesn't activate enough for me to warrant using the shield whatsoever, so I would recommend any other shield but this one, honestly. Deimos, I'm pretty sure is the name of the shield, is a very good one because it gives +1 to all skills, as well as a few other useful resists. But find a better shield than this one and you'll be good. The +1 skills to Rune Mastery is nice on that shield too. But so Tunic of the Magi, I use this solely for extra resistances, and this Tunic of the Magi was also enhanced with the legendary craftsmanship quest. You'll notice it has I think the +20 intelligence and the +47 energy regeneration are skill disruption protection, and I think slow resistance are the two added resistances on that chest. Stonebinder's Cuffs, which I use on basically all of the builds that I have. I picked the ones mine that have energy on it because extra energy is nice for this build. Main reason you use Stonebinder's Cuffs are for the +3 to all skills. That is invaluable in this game, basically. And the charm that I chose for was basically an increase to health regeneration. And the main reason that I chose that is because my necklace takes away some health regen. And also, I found that my survivability for this build was a little bit lacking, so I wanted to increase my survivability in whatever way I possibly could. Necklace of Harmonia, I chose this because of the resistances on it. Pierce and Poison, they're both pretty hard resistances to get. Elemental resists are pretty easy to get. And aside from that, on this necklace, you also have Life Leech and attack damage converted to health, both of which will increase my survivability when I am in combat attacking enemies. It basically, so long as I am in combat and attacking enemies, it'll help keep me alive. So these legs right here, the main reason that I chose these are for the vitality resist, as well as the whatchamacallit, the spellcaster stats, I guess, for lack of better words. I mean, you can honestly choose something better. There's nothing as like insanely impressive on these legs. The fire damage, burn damage, vitality damage boosts, they'll be a very, very minor for my build, but it's a good caster boots. Just basically something I found slapped on this character. So this charm is it's a artifact. It's an artifact that is essentially made for Rune Mastery. As you can see from the two things on it, 25% chance of +200% elemental damages. Since we are using rune weapon, our main form of attack is elemental damage. So the extra 200% is insane on it. And then we also have the 263% elemental damages on my weapon. The thing about all of these different procs is I have no idea if they stack. Like, I have no idea if I can proc, this one and this one at the same time and they stack with each other, or if this one just overrides this one. Sadly, there's not enough information out there about Titan Quest, and unless I, theory crafted it myself, I wouldn't be able to tell. But aside from that, I wanted to try this artifact, and this artifact also gives me +2 to all skills in Rune Mastery, which is phenomenal as well. And I skipped my helm. This helm, the only reason that I chose this helm is because it gives me a flat plus 58% elemental damages, which is nice for this build because it will increase my overall damage. It also gives me a few extra survivability, etc., stuff from that. Let me take a sip of this drink real fast since my throat is dry, and then I'll explain my stats, and we will go on and kill some enemies so I can show you how the build works. Okay, so as far as stats go, as you can see, I have a small amount of strength. You only need enough strength to equip to your weapon and your shield. Unless you're going like a melee Seidr worker character, then these stats are inaccurate for you, and you would want to check out my website probably for more information on the other build. So intelligence, this is the main thing that I dump all of my points into because intelligence increases my damage, it increases elemental damages. Dexterity, you want enough dexterity to equip Stonebinder's Cuffs. That's your benchmark as far as dexterity goes. And if you look at Stonebinder's Cuffs, you'll see that they require 425 dexterity. So there's your benchmark right there. You need 425 dexterity for Stonebinder's Cuffs. After that, really, you just dump all your points into intelligence. That's all there is to it. Once you have enough strength to equip a shield, you have enough dexterity for Stonebinder's Cuffs, you dump everything else into intelligence to buff your damage. The only exception is maybe put a little tiny bit into health if you're like me and you found that your health was exceptionally low for your character. So as far as actual combat, let's run out there. I'll show you how this build works. And hold on, let me buff my pet. Pro tip, if you need to buff your pet and it's not working when you like mouse over him, you can't cast it on him, just mouse over his portrait and you can cast it directly on him via his portrait. So, every single fight, you usually want to open that fight by throwing runic mines on the ground like you've seen me do. So I want to pull these slimes, I'll drop runic mines like that, and then I will start blasting away at the slimes as they approach. Thunderstrike, you'll want to use almost every single time that it is off cooldown. Even if you're just fighting one target, Thunderstrike does insane damage. So it's worth using even when you're only fighting a single target, despite the fact that it's an AoE ability. And for this build, you probably will have to drink potions very often, so keep that in mind. This is definitely a potion chugging build. I almost never drink energy potions, but I constantly pound health potions. So, I will explain what I'm doing, just for those of you who need a audio explanation of, things that are going on. When first thing I do is I drop runic mines, and then I spam rune weapons until enemies get close enough, at which point I usually Thunderstrike them. Rune weapon has a slightly larger range than Thunderstrike, so that's why I start with rune weapons instead of Thunderstrike. You might notice I am using Seal of Fate, which you don't have to buy, although it is an option for you. Like I said at the start of the video, I'm not that big of a fan of Seal of Fate, but I'm trying to make myself a fan of it, so I use the ability on whatever build I can fit it into. I know it's really, really good. I know a lot of people that swear by this ability. It's just never really clicked with me as much as it has with others. And I'll show you how to handle big scary packs here in a second. I'm gonna pull most of this cave, and we're gonna AoE it down. So that's a lot of golems. That's a big scary pack for me. All those golems. So as you can see, I'm dropping runic mines all over the place. And if you do this, you will need to consume more potions than normal, because runic mines cost a lot of mana. So there you go. We basically just kited around like most of the enemies in this cave and took them all out. And that is that's an example of how you'll play this class when you're leveling up and you encounter like a group of enemies that are like too hard for you to tank. And that's going to happen a few times. It'll happen no matter what build you are. That, like, when you get to, like, Act 3, the Dragonkin there, and you're not well enough geared or whatever, it happens to us all. You might end up doing the runic mine kiting strategy that you're seeing me doing here. But it is it's a nice strategy that I use on almost all of my rune all of my rune mastery characters. And as you've seen too, like I explained in at the start of the video, with the freezing mine passive that comes with your runic mines, it will slow down enemies and also sometimes stun them, giving you a lot of time to attack them while they're stunned or, you know, otherwise preoccupied / incapacitated. It will also slow them, which will give you plenty of time to get ahead of them, turn around, thunderstrike them, or, you know, whatever it may be. Something that is worth mentioning, elemental damages in this game is not able to score a critical hit. Just a random tidbit of information. If you are using rune weapon, you will not be able to crit with rune weapon. You will, however, be able to crit with Thunderstrike and, whatchamacallit. I think Thunderstrike can crit. I know Phantom Strike definitely can, if you're playing the Seidr worker that way. I should just say Seder instead of trying to say it like the ancient Norse way, because then it sounds like I'm saying like cider, like apple cider. So as you can see though, this build is pretty powerful. These enemies do outlevel me by a decent amount, almost 10 levels, and I'm not having too much of an issue with them. I do cut through them pretty darn good. It is partly in part because of my gear and my weapon, of course, obviously. I do a decent amount of elemental damages. If you need to farm a good gear or a good weapon for your own character, what I would recommend you do is do the Gadir Orb Merchant in the Atlantis expansion pack. He's in the main town of the Atlantis expansion pack. You can get a ton of really, really fantastic items from the Gadir Orb Merchant. He's just the best. It's basically like loot boxes, just you don't pay real money, you pay like in-game gold, which is how loot boxes should be. And yeah, it's just fantastic. In this game, whenever I need gear, I farm money instead of actually farming gear, because I just go to the Gadir Orb Merchant and dump all my money into him. And you kind of just see me do the runic mine kiting trick here as well, in this cave. And I think I'll end the video here because there's really not much more for me to show you. I'm just going to run around and destroy everything anyway. But that's really all there is to this build. This build is a pretty easy build to play. As you can see, I mean, look at my bars. I got like 4 abilities that I use aside from my buffs. So, I mean, it's going to be a very, very basic build and probably something that can be rather boring if you're used to playing, you know, other builds that have a lot of abilities going on at once and stuff like that. So keep that in mind before, you know, going down the road and choosing this build. Maybe do Thunderstrike and Phantom Strike if you find it too boring the way that I'm playing it now. But as you can see, it is quite effective. It is going to definitely get the job done, and you can definitely clear the entire game with this build, as I have. Aside from that, though, if you guys enjoyed this video and it helped you out, please leave me a like because that helps me out. And if I left anything out, forgot anything, or you guys have any tips, tricks, or anything you would like to add whatsoever, please leave a comment below. The comments are always welcome. And aside from that, I guess I will catch you guys around in future Titan Quest videos. Peace.